Every thousands of years, a game gets remade. Or in this case, every other year, a game gets remade in the same series. And oh man, it's something that actually was a pretty rare thing. It didn't happen all too often. But now every game, not even just in if one franchise or series, but every company is just remaking every game. Any game that they've done that has already had a lifespan of a year, maybe lost about $10 in the store, now it went from $80 to $70, basically gets a remake. And I just don't understand how companies, as I said, they rarely did it back then, but it still was a thing they did. They used older games for nostalgia purposes and made them more modern with the graphics and upping the gameplay to make it all sparkly and shiny, give a brand new story for newcomers, or maybe just updated it entirely, but I mean, it potentially helped, though. There was a lot of times where these remakes were amazing, they actually made the game overall even just better than the original. But then there's times where it's just, it's okay and a waste of time, or just even a completely shit, and then they just lost a lot of money, and I don't understand. Like, no game is really safe from being remade, especially in the current time we're in. And a prime example is a game that I'm fond of, which is Resident Evil 4.
Leon! Small world, eh? Well, I see that the president's equipped his daughter with ballistics, too.
How rude!
Resident Evil 4 is a prime example of a game that does not need a remake. This game still in the modern day plays perfectly well. It does not need a remake because the graphics look fine, the story is fine, people still buy the game, and it always makes me worried and concerned when they are remaking these games, because what they tend to do, for some odd reason, is one, they tend to, like I said, they remake games they don't need it. So other games, let's say in the Resident Evil series, Code Veronica. Resident Evil Code Veronica is a game that almost no one hears about. That game could use a remake. It's a pretty bad story. Pacing isn't good. They could definitely tune that. They could also do Resident Evil 0, another game that people ask for. These are Resident Evil 0 would be a great game. It has a built-in co-op system that, not really co-op, but it basically had a mechanic in the original. They could literally turn that into co-op, bring co-op back to Resident Evil, bring it some horror, back into horror, and then sell that. Do another game that has co-op, like Outbreak, remake that, and then make a ton of money off multiplayer in Resident Evil. That would be a great idea, and I doubt anyone would complain about co-op, right? And that's one big issue, is they have so many games they can do, but they're just not doing it. My second biggest issue, which is something that doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen a few times, is they always tend to remove the original game. I don't know why they do it, or if you guys notice it, definitely let me know if you do, but they remove the original so you can no longer buy them and you have to only buy the remake. It's happened quite a handful of times for some remakes that I try to play, but oh my god, it's annoying not being able to play the original game. And that's kind of the more Capcom side of things, but there's also a game that does need a remake, like Silent Hill. It is finally being revived. It is a fantastic psychological horror type of game. And this game does need a remake, and they're redoing the second one instead of the first one, which is a little bit odd, but you know what, I'm still down for it. And I am extremely excited, because this is a game that's died and they haven't released any newer games in a while. A remake of this game would definitely be welcoming, because we haven't actually had a Silent Hill remake ever. And plus they're doing newer projects, and you know what, hey, this is the first attempt trying it, so I'm definitely excited for it. So in that regard, it does need a remake. And then there's there's also these remakes that are kind of happening right now where they screwed up once doing it and then they're doing it again, or they screw up something in the series, they want to redo it. It's kind of going with The Last of Us and Alone in the Dark. So Alone in the Dark actually had I'm pretty sure they had a remake back a few years ago, and it was bad. It was horrible. Everyone hated it. And now they've announced they're actually doing another remake of Alone in the Dark. So hopefully it does well, but it's funny how instead of, trying to do something new, they're trying to redo it again after screwing it up. Kind of the same with Last of Us. Last of Us had the second part that released a few years ago, and it did horribly well. It was people hated it. It was not what they wanted, it's not what they asked for, and people gave it to them. The developers gave it to them. And now it's kind of redoing the first one to start all over from the beginning because they ruined what the great things they had going for it. So they decided to say, hey, let's hit the redo switch, click the button, and just redo this whole thing. I just don't get why the solution is to make a remake. Like, it seems too often the solution, instead of moving forward, is to redo what we've already done. Sometimes it's good, sometimes, like, you know, their games are fantastic. We had games like the old classic Resident Evil game, which is better than the original. We had Metal Gear Solid Twin Snakes. In my opinion, I liked it a little bit more, but I heard the music is way better than the original, right? We have all these other fantastic games, but yet they keep trying to, like, redo a lot more than they need to. And it kind of starts to hold the series back and the franchise. And I'm not sure how I feel about it. I'm really iffy. It's not bad getting these games. I mean, like, if you really think about it, we are getting newer games and, you know, more modern versions of the classic games that we love with different controls, you know, brings in newer people who have never played these games or who want to get into the games. That's always good. You know, like, it's good to have that kind of value from a game, even if it doesn't end up being to what us, the original fans, like. And that's okay. But at the same time, the cons are now we are losing time that we could be getting for newer games or games that desperately could use a remake just for, you know, people who really want to appreciate what the original had, but to up it to its fullest potential. Like I said with Resident Evil 0 before, that is a game with a lot of potential, and these games are getting left behind. Personally, I want less remakes. I would love or at least if they prioritize the right remakes, that would be fantastic. But I do understand wanting to have a remake. I totally get that. I definitely say, you know, what do you guys feel? Do you guys feel want more remakes or kind of less? As I say, I want less. That's just personally me. But hopefully these do well. I guess kind of the future for this is that we're going to be getting quite a few more. Like I said, we have an Alone in the Dark. Dead Space will be getting a remake as well. That would probably coming way later. We haven't seen too much on it. We'll also be getting FF7 Remake Part 2, which could be pretty good as well. So, I mean, kind of a lot to look forward to. I think the only remake I'm not too hype on is Resident Evil 4. That is the only one that I did not enjoy, surprisingly. It was very small things I didn't like. Like, when I saw, like, the way the combat looked and the flow, I don't know. Like, when I look at the characters and the combat and the flow of the game, I didn't enjoy it as much as I wanted to, but everything else I saw, like with the other games like Silent Hill, you know, a little bit of Dead Space, all that else, like everything else looked fantastic. So it does kind of suck that I'm not as hyped as I wanted to be for this game, because I was probably more hyped than that's bullshit. I was way more hyped for Silent Hill. Silent Hill is gonna be fantastic, you know, like I haven't played a Silent Hill game in ever. I've never played a single Silent Hill game. So I'm definitely a lot more hyped for that. So the best thing we can do, I guess, at the end of the day is kind of just stay positive. Hope for the best when it comes to these games, future projects, and kind of stay look out for any more remakes. I'm going to try to start keeping a nice little tally of how many fucking remakes we're going to hit. And worst case scenario, I guess I'll just buy the original games on eBay because I can't buy them online anymore.